Yes, yes, yes. And good evening, everybody. How are y'all doing? Oh, as I give people a few minutes to get themselves ready, um, okay, get everything ready. There we go. All right, looks like everything is sounding clear on my end. Let me double check. Let's see. All right, my sound's good. Very good. All right. So let me do this. All right, everybody. Thank y'all for your patience. We could now begin. I wish I did this a little earlier, but you know how things are. I had to knock this out the way. Let's see. If anybody that's listened to today's podcast stream, please make sure you hit the like button, like always. Tonight, we'll be looking to the feminist hype and the emergence of the white bourgeois women as sexual pioneers and liberators, or bourgeois, in other words, but that's how it's pronounced. As y'all know, this is a series of many series. This is actually only chapter 1 of this section. Very short chapter in essence. The other chapter will be very lengthy and it'll be breaking down into 2 parts, so be on the lookout for that. But for no further ado, we'll go into this one. And anything? Oh no. So let's begin. In the prevailing sexual liberation movement, what goes for a revolution is often radical but not geared to genuine social, political transformation, and in the fact takes the place of basic revolutionary struggles. Moreover, the very solution which white radicals and their black followers hold out an alternative to this capable nuclear family and the corrosion of the layman extent of the family of the agrarian past are but unconscious adaptations to the demand of a post-industrial society. And I'll put a period right there saying we're now moved from post-industrial into now digital/technical age. And as y'all know, as we move further into the 21st century, this technical age will heighten and accelerate how people view people and how society's going to look in the next 10 to 20 or hell, 30 years going down the line. And the reason why that is because now the society is demanding less people, compounded in more of a secure place or more of a box environment, because it is known, and if anybody has done studies, but let's say if there were studies done, it's found evident when people are more clustered into more harsh and cities environments, they tend to have less children. And to know this, that it is important to understand that the society is trying to eliminate people. Now, how they'll do this, you will only know with time. But I'm not going into more detail because I think your common sense will pick up more than anything else. So let's move on. And peace to everybody that's listening. Thank you. I see y'all. I might ask questions or answer questions at the end of this podcast, so be patient. All right. Such correctiveness will serve to further non-nuclearize or fragmentize and automize the family unit. For instance, anti-male, even anti-material feminism and the rationalization of the rise of single parenthood and the general romanticization of impersonal relationships or impersonal relationships. The advocacy of unsexiness and unsexualization, ultra permissive childbearing, and is alienation of the parent-child relations and corrosions of family loyalties. Understanding us, many of these diversions represent justifiable individual rights and freedoms. For example, there is nothing wrong with being a black female single parent, and one rightfully makes the most of any situation in which he finds herself. But there is something wrong with why a black woman is so much more likely to experience the single parent situation, why one race can freely imprison, sent off to military duty, unemployment, underemployed, and otherwise destroy the oppressive black woman eligibility male supply. Also, there is something wrong with glorifying this problem. Instead of rising up to change it, people will speak here of options, but forced or unattentive options must be called by some other name. Besides this conflict, this confusion of individual rights and collective liberation is at the heart of our present apathy and activity. For wherever an oppressive people begins to feel too weak to fight their social oppression, they will tend, among other things, to turn away from social combat, alternately to patch up their own battered selves, to personally growth and self-satisfaction in the name of social change. In our times, this comprise a variety of feel-good maneuvers and endless contemplation of our inner lives and the cosmos, meditation, primal therapy, astrology, tai chi, born again, religious, atheism, fanatical, dietary, pessimism, and subtimized narcissism, plus encounter of every kind in the realm of paralysis or paralysis chronology in the areas of sexual liberation. Except middle-aged, affluent housewife who have amongly and occupied the pedestals all their lives will now saturated, not as seize a job that could have gone to somebody who needs in an order now to focus in the findings of my own identity. Which brings us to the second major premise in our thesis, that the current sexual liberation movement does not surpass a revolutionary alternative to the social political status quo, that merely an unconscious adaptation to it. We refer in the instance specifically to the middle class white woman liberation movement. What follows has nothing to do with the issues of the obvious justice of women, rights, and freedom. On the contrary, many of the what they call altruism, liberation, feminist efforts to erase gender identity and bioculture distinctions between males and females, mistakenly making sameness synonymous with equality, apparently underground of any belief that women have the right to exist as full humans being and to enjoy all human what they call privileges as women, or pre-organized as women, and to be proud of their own bodies and their difference, and to realize that they're full even with divergent potentialities and contributions without having to first become men or even like men. The question then is, when and why did the movement arise, and whether its consequence and revolutionary or reactionary? And I'll stop right. It's not neither though. It's posed as a distraction for what movements that was done here in America since the civil rights movement of the late 50s or mid 50s. And its attentions was created by other groups of men, competing groups of men. They let their own race of women, which y'all know is the European woman, come out to say, I am woman, I shall rights. It's not just a ploy because in their household they were good. Now we all know the abuse that other cultures, especially European men and European women, inflict towards each other. And usually the man is much stronger than the woman. So what you see, instead of him fighting, he has diverted a plan and strategy to have his woman give her some entitlements and rights, just oppose on the population of African American people here in America. But let's go further into the reading. Leaving aside for the movement, it functions as a diversion altering to black rebellion. Let us look at how the women liberation movement arose simply out of an corporation forces already in motion and sympathetic to the over-industrialized status quo. To begin with, the Western industrialization not only separate homes and work, it also pushes women out of the home with the mechanization of domestic chores and even the suckling of babies. Did you get that? So I remember a good brother YouTuber said that in regards to the African American woman, how she has never been rested at all in any femininity, which I do agree, because at times her man had to work and she had to work, even to the point she was doing domestic chores, where she goes to these European houses in America and she gets pump and dumped by her boss or the one that she has to work for in these households. Hell, even go as far as the man probably went and took it, which probably they did too. Because not every woman that works is going to just give up the coochie. Don't work like that. Most men, as you know, European history, they're very aggressive and they take it at the end of the day. They simply take it. And God knows, they usually, if most of the African American women survive this encounter while doing domestic work, she won't get knocked up in the process. But we just don't know. And I think some have. But this is the dark history in this country in regards to black people or African American here in this country. But let's go further. But also pull women into the workforce or the workplace, where they supply the army of Kurgel and related works demanded by the mushrooming bureaucratization of society. However, even when the white middle class woman was privatized in the home, and childbearing and homemaking had become full-time occupation, black and poor women have already long been forced out of the homes for the economic survival of their families. Now, you know, most people don't talk about that. Have y'all noticed that? Have y'all really noticed that? I remember there was another book that I can't find on PDF. It did talk about after this so-called women's liberation that started take on its way during the 60s, going on the 70s. And it always said that the African American woman had it easy. She never did had it much easy here in America because she always had to work. The problem is now that because of the programming now, she cannot really balance between work and dealing with the household. Even to the point now you see a campaign there of more a divide between the sexes. From you see African American women don't want to even deal with, well, not saying not deal with this because they still mess with African American men, but they don't want to deal with any cost because they feel they are unprotected, not respected. So what they do now, they go and drove said, we're not going to deal with or protect any African American man moving forward. Now, will this be dangerous? I don't know. Only time will tell. But I know the scheme of things that when we are out here on the public forums and on the social media and all these outlets, we're doing disservice as a collective, as a whole, when we put out our biz, what we are not going to do with each other or as collective as people. And my advice to most people that's African American that will be listening to this, to stop it, stop putting your biz, what you said you're not going to do in regards to your counterpart. Because other races are listening. The men are listening and also women are listening, and they're taking full advantage of y'all divide. Keep that in mind. Okay. However, even when the white middle class woman was privatized at home and childbearing, homemaking had become full time occupations, black and poor women had already long been forced out of homes, which I read already. It was the growth and inability of women to work force the raising standards of living, demand for dual breadwinning, and the decline birth rate following the initial post-World War II baby boom compensatory preoccupation with birth control and zero population growth, plus the relentless pouring down and nuclearization of the family unit that flungs women into the workforce where feminism could feed upon decaying family norms and the volatility of shifting sexual mores. And for those that's hearing this stream, liking it, please hit that like button while you listen to this podcast, please. Whereas early women movement had tended to focus on a single issue, such as suffrage, and the most conspicuous difference assumed by the movement, or conspicuous, of the 1960s and 1970s, aside from the more global demand, was its attacks on the very ideal of feminism and even gender identity itself. But of course, the more things changed, the more there remained the same. For the white woman movement arose not so much in the service of revolutionary structural change as an assertion of an ideology and a self-expression and the search for personal satisfaction and identity. The do your own thing that arose in the new epoch of the 1970s was the sense, or what they call the sine qua non of the women's liberation ideology, whereas greater sexual license and variety were seen as synonymous with the women's elevation and equalization, when in fact these were the very privilege most men had been lusting for all their lives. Besides, these new sexual liberties could really be tolerated by the state as a psychology safety valve to the true revolutionary streams in the manner described by Hubert Marcuse in the Eros of Civilization, or the Eros of Civilization. And so a number of women were able to alert their personal lives, but made hardly any structural change that was not already in the cards of mass urbanization and industrialization societal evolutions. Interesting. Now get this. As a matter of fact, the relative median year-round full-time earning for white women actually decreased by comparison to white men between 1963 and now, while black women made tremendous gains relative to black men. In other words, the feminist movement enabled the white male to keep his act together, to retain his position of superior audience to his woman, while further decapitating the black male ability to prevail and compete in a perpetual patriarchal society, thus aggravating the alienation and disunity of black males and black females. Do you get that? So throughout this creation done by the European man, he has not lost no inch of power since he established and created feminism. And we all know the history by Gloria Steinem, and she worked for the Central Intelligence Agency. But you must understand, there is no way in heck there will be a feminism without the assistance and creation by the European man. And matter of fact, we go deeper. It was developed by doctoring European man. I forgot the man's name again. I remember Mr. Gray gave me this. But it was created by a particular European man back in the 50s or 60s, around that time, the time when Gloria Steinem was in college. He came up and created this form of feminism to try to push his woman up front so that way he could still be able to operate in the society and still rule over all with the help of his woman. Remember, people complain about racism. Racism is and is indeed a team sport. Let's see. Our computations from census data additionally revealed that the white male did not alter appreciable his patriarchal or participation in the labor force since 1963. So that's roughly almost 57 years. He has not lost any steam in that area. Keep that in mind. Nor that of the black had to work to make up for the relative psychosocial economic suppression of her man. Okay. Can y'all hear me? Alright, it should go back. It should come back on. Alright. Alright, everybody can hear me? Let me see if I can refresh the chat. Alright guys, I'm back on. Okay, give me a second. Alright. Hello? If you hear me back on, just let me know. Press something. Let me know. Alright, let's continue. Where was I? Okay. But almost to the exact extent that the white female has entered the labor force, the black male has been pushed out of it, with obvious consequence for black sexual and family relationships. Now that the white woman outnumbers the black male roughly 12 to 1, and it's almost twice as likely to have been graduating from college. Thus, for every black male college grad, there are about 24 white female college grads. This plus the white female prioritize or proximity and intimate relationships to the white male, fourth ordain her privilege access to the necessities limit new jobs. Consequently, if we take black college grads in urban places where most now live between the age of 19 and 44, for every 100 male, there are 54 extra females on top of this. The white woman as a whole, though not in the professional class, as such face an eligible male shortage of her own, and according to slip over to further deplete the vanishing black male supply. For even when the white female is not a college person, she prefers to marry the college level black male. Now, if y'all remember, roughly in America, it's roughly 30% we're married as African American people here in this soil, and out of that 30%, most African American males are not only dating but marrying out from their African American woman. Is that a coincidence? Because ladies, I'm being honest with you, depending what your status is, if you look a certain, and mostly, and I'm gonna say this, gonna hurt feelings. Not every African American woman is over a 7 on the average. On the average. So if you under a 7, you're 6 or 5 in face and maybe big or whatever on the lower ends of your body, or what we call fat. If you're not snatched up an African American man while you're in college, your chances of getting married is very much slim for the average a percentage of most of us getting married overall in this country. So to correct this, you might have to start seeking mates if you're going to pursue a so-called 4-year degree in college. If you seek to become married one day. Other than that, it gets very difficult, especially if you have kids and you're not married. It gets even more harder. So that's a little food for thought, because your counterpart on the average, even when this book was written back 36 years ago, still get married through college. And be honest with you, we don't understand, why do non-African American men and women, or actually non-blacks women, get married in college? Because as y'all know, every other cultural race and woman knows about what we call the wall. And obviously, as you go higher in the color spectrum, black is the highest form of melanin. You don't age much, but you're in looks per se, but you are aging nonetheless by the actual age you are. And that is a strike on you if you're trying to get a serious 6-figure mate. Because on the average, most men that's making roughly over 100K more are going to look for women that is younger, youthful, and has a very much sexy body. You get it? All right. Let's go on. Let us make no mistake about this thing of sex and race. In a patriarchal society, which is both sexist and racist, it is the male of oppressed species who, in the ruling male mind, conceivably would take his place from the moment of the first encounter with the darker race, and the white male has feared exclusion and inadequacy in any unrestrained sexual interaction of the race. Historically, he has used for white females as an object and a force simultaneously in various extent, and withheld as a distraction to the aspirations of the black race. The black male has been the main objective of this subsidiary lure, but it has been the black woman who has been left to bear the acute emotional brunt and social trauma of the destruction and diversion of black male collective thrust. For an analysis of how the feminist movement itself has been employed by the West, its neo-colonial policies of African domination, who would ask the readers to see Akoi O Pal, definition of a woman and the development of an African perspective, as well as Frantz Fanon chapter on the unveiling of Algiers in his studies in a dying colorism. And I think that's a very good book to get, if I may say so myself, and I think people should get that book by Frank Fanon. While it is true that the white race has a family problem, it is of a wholly different characterized, and whereas the white race has a woman problem, the black race has a woman problem and a man problem. Hence, it was altogether ludicrous, even if cute and cunning, when the white feminists of the 1960s and 1970s sought to exploit the spirit of the metamorphosis and the rhetoric of the black movement, but refused to face up to their own racism. A silent case in point is the current rape scare perpetuating, according to the analysis reported in Social Problems, the Journal of Society for the Study of Social Problems, as an opportunist appeal to press coverage and sympathize for the feminist movement, despite the fact that the incident of rape had not Miss Room available figures shown about 8 out of 10 rapists and rape victims to be black. Rape is a problem in black male-female relationships, but the black woman is getting raped while the white woman is doing the screaming. More white males in absolute numbers rape black women than black males rape white women. Indeed, as far back as the 1940s, when the white male exploitation of the rape scare smokescreen clearly soars, and the Southern white liberal Lillian Smith reports in her famous book Strange Fruit that a white woman's chances of getting raped by a black man are about as great as her probability of being struck by a bolt of lightning. You get that? But you know, they put the face of predatory and sexual abuse not by your European but by the non-European man, which is the African American man, as the face of rape culture and all this nonsense. And they've been still not only raping African American males, but they're raping African American women at a high rate. Even today, as I'm speaking, reading this was a relatively known study, and it's been known even back in the 80s and still going on in the 21st century. So when I hear people talk about, say, African American men are raping African American women in numbers, I always think to myself, where did they get this form of rape from? Because what makes sense a man to go out his way to go take the coochie? Is this psychologically embedded in him, or this is something that was done traumatically for centuries during the butt-breaking process? Because you just can't come out of the womb as a male and decide you want to just get a woman's yoni. It don't work like that. It doesn't work like that. But anyway. Yet the APA monitors, the official organ of the American Psychology Association, reports that at 21.7 million research boost was recommended by the President Commission and requests by the President, including 6 million for rape, and which equal and the amount allotted for all minorities' mental health, and is greater than the mere 4 million advance for urban mental health problems. Yet the rape scare is so tied to the black males in the popular minds, and the white woman knows this. This will further defame him there and in an image of his woman and his own. It is part of the neo-racism now emerging, about which there is so much we could say, but we must turn now to black sexual liberation proper. The idea of black sexual change has mainly encountered to fallout and reaction, including overreaction to white norms and notions. In 1971, we raised a cry in the page of the Black Scholar. Will the real black man please stand up? But there we said in this part, in this it quotes, this is an era of liberation, and because it is the era of liberation, the black man will be able to bring the woman along in our common struggles so that we will not need a black woman liberation movement. In the struggle to reinsert our black manhood, we must sidestep the traps of turning against our women, and they in retaliation turning against us. The black woman can be, and the black man helper and underlying collaborator standing up with him besides her man. And this notion of incorporating the idea of black women liberation into the black movement, but not to take the place of it, was the same views that V.F. Lehman had expressed when the Bourgeois feminist movement threatened the Russian Socialist Initiative. Our national survey of black women reports in transaction now society in 1969 had already noted that the black woman very stance towards the white feminist and feeling that the black woman's fate was ineradicable and bound to that of the black male. However, forces were already in motion which would cripple the aspiration of the black female and the black male. The signal was sounded in 1969, though of course it did not begin there. But Betty Friedan, the feminine mystique, and her role in founding the National Organization for Women are credited with launching the women's liberation movement in the way that Dr. Sparky is thought to have initiated permissiveness in childbearing. Freudian was quoted as saying that black had the 60s, women will have the 70s. It was true that whites for years have been thrashing about the way the mean to seize the revolutionary initiative. This effort sprang up during the passive resistance and a sit-in movement, but escalated with the open rejection of white females and white control by a black power-minded SNCC, and the overall turn towards a separatist black consciousness, and the Vietnam issued human rights briefings, ecology, and at last women's liberation content for the revolutionary initiative that held by blacks. In women's liberation, at least whites had a hook, unlike laymen who wishes to incorporate the bourgeois women movement into the socialist movement. White males, Marxists, as a group appear quite willing to embrace the less risky forms of struggle. It permits white males to keep a bigger slice of the American pie in the family while they engage in counterism combat with their poor middle-class wives, their mothers, their daughters, their loners or their lovers, or as many prefer, join them as comrades and sand armies. The white male may be the common oppressor of the black race, and the white female be the white woman sleeping with the enemy. Sorry. With white women, we cannot seriously talk about a genuine revolutionary seize of power, or for lack of a better phrase, any true territorial imperative. We can merely speak of biocultural change, or as we have seen, individual self-expression. Western societies has always been prepared to grant individual rights and freedoms as over against collective or social transformations. The black race can exist apart from whites. Without them, biologically poor people conceivably could exist and propagate without the rich. But women are not a biological autonomous population and could not long exist the perpetual themselves without men, nor of course vice versa. It is anti-nature and therefore anti-human merely to suggest this fancy. Human cloning may one day be accomplished, presumably in his image, but we ourselves are not afraid to say that we believe it is neither necessary nor desirable. Anyway, the now quiet kept secret of the black race man problem was a thorn in the side of the white woman liberation movement and a reason for opposition and resistance to an honest apparel of the systematic destruction of the black family. Thus, white scholars fell in behind American numbers. One sociologist, theorist, Tacome Parson, who expressively wishes to claim the black stir. The psychoanalyst Erik Erikson, after they met under the initiative auspice of the American Academy of Arts and Science in a movement to hoodwink black intellectuals into denying black family pathology and a search out of extol exclusive strength. When once they had engaged the black intelligentsias and this happy Negro, I'm okay, you okay, norm, vice versa, Peely power of position thinking, defense mechanism of denying and overlooking black family decay while hunting down and showing off savage strength, the white feminists added a abiding by their male scholars, including, of course, those who most conspicuously harp on black family strengthens, were left free to stress pathology in the white family. This conspiracy of silence about the destruction and oppression of black families, thus strengthening the gross intellectual dishonesty, was necessary because a forthright analysis of black families would inevitably point to the relative suppression of black males and a contradiction of the simplistically anti-male themes of white feminism, and that there were more white women in a position of exploiting black men, but far than black men so simultaneously to oppress white women, or situate to oppress white women. Above all, an honest examination of the black family will reveal perhaps the most painful problems of the black woman, that somebody is depleting, alienating, stealing, and otherwise threatening to extinction of her male. The black woman's greatest cry, if you will only talk to her sometimes and listen, is that she's too often lacking a strong black male to stand beside her. She feels implied too often to serve as a backbone of her family and to fulfill the formidable obligation of both mother and father to her children. This predicament and the denial of degradation of her beauty has resulted from efforts to defeminize her as a white oppressor, simultaneously struggling to emasculate, or at least we forget, the oppressed black male. The reason, of course, is that in order to subjugate you, you must first dehumanize, and this is accomplished by destroying the most intimate and basic of all human relations, the relations between male and female, and is much as the slave cannot be a full human being, and at the same time a slave and oppressed female cannot be a full human being, that it is a woman's, however her contemporary society may define that, any more than oppressed males can be a man. What is the source of these new schemes and subjugation, and where have they emerged? And that ends this chapter. And it's interesting enough to know and the funny thing about all this is that when they talk about feminism, I hear a lot about the history, but I'm hearing when people talk about this feminist nonsense, they go by what they're watching through media, for YouTube, etc. They have no idea how this thing is really structured and what is real intentions for down the line. Now, I noticed that there's a lot of our African American women that are feminists, and they got on and take on what we call feminist rhetoric from the white feminist herself. And that's done by institution. And if people have not understand, the purpose of building institution is to formulate and control the thinking of people, because you are able to teach and instill what you want them to know or learn. And I think feminism has taken and grown from a long way for the last 50 years or over close to 50 years because of institutions. Remember, Gloria Stein and all the other, even Angela Davis, got their understanding and learning of feminism through what we call the same institutions that they were in, the college institutions. And what it has done through this experiment, it has created an atmosphere of divide between men and women. Which the only way to correct this, if we were serious as a collective people, we're going to have to take control and create our own form of institutions. There is no way around to combat the feminist charge between our women, African American women, today. I would say more than half of them are feminists. They believe it. They coherently think it's the way to go, it's the way of life. And in return, because of this, their male counterpart is not only going to be more effeminized, but he's now not even going to look and seek to procreate with his counterpart, which is the African American woman. So now, as I check, see if any questions, anything that people have, any response to what was read. And let me do this. One thing I will say to a lot of people that as we go further into this chapter, it's going to get a little bit more intense, a little bit more interesting, because this is a template of how this family structure is going to be destroyed, which is probably destroyed already, most likely, but there is a deeper scheme of things, because now with destruction there is rebirth. Now we're not sure what type of rebirth we're going to see now in this decade, moving on close to the next 30 or hell 40 years once 2050 comes. We're trying to see what is the complexion of America. Is it going to be really like this tanning of America, or there's going to be very less of African American population here, where they're going to be very much bleached out? And in one generation you get a lot of things done, and a lot of things happen in the first 20 years. Right now, we're in the first century of 20 years. And I don't know what the future holds, but like I said, we have to be prepared and understand and respect history from the past, the present, and what's going to happen in the future. Because now we have a working template where things are going. And that's the message I want people to get understanding. So, to not hold anybody's time, thank y'all for listening to this stream, this podcast. This is the end of chapter 1, and titled Feminist Movement. Be on the lookout for the next reading. Till next time, take care now.